So now we will be discussing like how you can choose the right database for your application. So I have made a simple decision map that you can follow, a simple decision tree that you can follow to choose the database for your application. Whatever kind of application you're making, this will help you to choose the right database. So choosing the database is actually the last step. You have to follow these before choosing the right database. So the very first step before you're building any kind of application, you decide the core entities that you will be storing in your database. So the core entities that you will be storing in your database, that is the first step. For example, you're making an application like, let's say, Instagram. So what you will be storing, you may be storing users that is needed, and then there will also be an entity like posts, because every user can make a post. So post will also be an entity that will go into a database. So core entities is all about what is the thing that you need to store in the database. So the second step is, after you have defined entities, the second step is define the model for those entities. For example, users, the user entity will have a model like this: name, email, or ID, so on. Similarly, post will have something like this: ID, or maybe description, and maybe image also, if the post also has an image. So this will be the model of the entities that you will be storing. Also, you need to think about constraints. Constraint simply means the relationship between your entities. Example, post is owned by a user. Every post will be made by a user. If there's any kind of post, then that means that it is made by some user, right? So constraints and relationship is basically defining the relationship between the entities, because you need to know about the relationship between the entities. If you know that, you can choose the right database. If the entities that you have, they're highly relational in nature, then an SQL database will be the right choice. So I will come to this in a separate video. We will have a separate exercise. We will have problems and we will choose the right database using this kind of decision tree. So the second step is this defining model for entities and thinking about constraints and relationship. And then comes the third point. Third is thinking about access patterns. So access patterns, what does access pattern means? So how you're going to access those entities. So you have defined posts, you have defined users. Now the only thing you can do in a database, your application can do with the database is it can access this data. And how is it going to access the data? It may be it will maybe make a read request, or it will be a write request for any kind of entity. That's all your application is going to do. So you need to think about the access patterns. How many reads a particular entity your application is making for a particular entity, how many writes, how you're accessing the data, what kind of queries you are making. That also matters, because some database, for example, SQL supports evolving queries. Evolving queries, for example, it supports if your data becomes more relational in the future. So you have to think about access patterns. Access patterns simply means how you're accessing your data, and basically what is the ratio of read and write, and how frequently reads, how much frequent are the writes, what kind of query is common. Also, you need to basically estimate like what are the future queries on those entities. So that's the third step, and it's actually a very important step, the third step. Now comes the fourth step. So the fourth step is thinking about the scale. By now you have defined entities, you have defined the model for the entities, you have thought about access patterns, And now you need to think about the scale. What if the scale grows? Suppose the amount of concurrent users for your application grows. Will your database be able to handle that kind of load at a huge scale? So the access pattern that you thought earlier, what would happen to those patterns at large scale? Large scale read and writes on the entities that you create. So this also affects the choice of the database. Once you have thought all about this, now you can pick the database. So that's how you pick the database. We go through these four decision lines to pick the right database for your application.